Like leaves on the Mississippi River. Black leaves in the Mississippi fire. Black leaves in the Mississippi choir. Black leaves on the Mississippi land. And we've got garden, we've got sons and daughters, we've got grit and glory, we've got mama stories, we've got strength like towers, we got hope and power. Like leaves on
Good everything.
Good everything.
Hey, her name is Kirby.
Kirby, you say?
Kirby,
Kirby.
K-I-R-B-Y.
Interesting. Where is she from?
Mississippi.
Is she?
Yes.
She grew up there?
Grew up, born and bred. Born and
You
bred.
talked to her before? I mean, you had conversation.
Oh, no, she's been, and there's a little feedback. She produced this song, Black Leaves, and it was going viral. People were saying Jonathan Majors sounds like one of his types of songs. When he's old, they were trolling him a little bit. But and then other people like, the lash is coming when you hear a song like this. And so she came out and did she said, listen, this is a song from my, this is a song of inspiration, of empowerment. This is not about slavery or the lash. This is about the kinds of sounds that I heard growing up in my church that had about 50 people, half of them were my cousins. And these were the utterances made by my mama, my grandmama, my great grandmama. And this is the kind of music that inspires me to continue. And I was thinking about, blood on the leaves, blood at the root, how we're starting today. And this song, a lot of times we hear those songs, we get sad or we feel some ways and it takes us back to a time we don't want to be in. But this young person, I think she has the assignment. We got to move forward with the memory of what we came from. And what we came from was resilience and empowerment. And we're here and we can't forget who we are. And I feel like she captures that in Black Leaves. So I just wanted to center us. You are. Hello. Hi.
I'm listening. No, I'm listening. I'm thinking as you're talking.
Yeah.
It took a long time to tease out the difference in our Africana framework between cultural meaning making and movement and memory, as we talked about many times. And every generation marks its moment in time and space, and then the question becomes, how do you connect the generations? So every generation does cultural meaning making. This week in my Black aesthetics class, Africana meaning making is what we've renamed it. We don't want to confuse the nice people at Howard University and the registrar's office, so we keep it as Black aesthetics on the book, but that's absolutely not what it is. But in that work, we were comparing across generations, and I shared with the young people a clip. You may have seen this. Don Cornelius. It's a Soul Train episode where Don Cornelius is talking with James Brown and Bobby Blue Bland. And then Bobby Blue Bland and James Brown talking to each other, like James Brown said, I was trying to sound like him, but can't nobody sound like him. And then Don Cornelius said, we're going to bring a special guest onto the stage. And here comes B.B. King. And then they improvise for only about 2-3 minutes singing the blues. And when I listen to this young sister, I hear a trace of that. I hear the work songs, of course, because that is the rhythm. That's the same rhythm that Sam Cooke repurposed for Chain Gang. It's that huh, huh. It's a work song. It's also a bit of a dirge, like when you hear the West African funeral dirges, the Akan, among others. That's this, which of course we hear Bill Withers repurpose, and then Blackstreet repurpose from Bill Withers. So it isn't the sound. It's also whatever else that conveys, and the idea. And yeah, today we're talking about blood on the leaves, blood at the root, because it's a bloody world we live in that context. And it's also autumn in New York, which we'll talk about, which is Billie Holiday. She has a trace of that. First time I heard Erykah Badu, I thought, she sounds a little like Billie Holiday. It's all cultural meaning making. And then the question becomes, how do you connect across the generations. How, as you move through time and space, do you not only tap into those previous generations to bring them forward, but what do you bring forward out of them?
Right.
Is it more than the sound? Is it more? So if
Listen
you,
to her
I don't know,
from-
can you find, can you, I would love for you if you could find that.
I'm gonna find her. Because
No, not her. I mean, yeah, but go ahead, I'm listening.
yeah, but for her to be that age or this young, I don't know how old she is, but she seems young. And we are in a space right now where there are some folk defending, you know, the P. Diddy and you know, black man, blah blah blah, because that period of time from the 90s to the 2000s, his fingerprints were all over it, and there's no music that was produced during that time, and it makes us feel, music makes us feel something, and it connects us to, as you said, time and space, to a point where we have a hard time separating the music from the man or from the myth, from the legend or whatever, because it is the soundtrack of our lives at that time. And, you know, to see the next generation harken back to a time, like you said, keep pulling it forward, rooted in our cultural understanding of, you know, what it means to be here in this place, but also take it back to the continent, because that humming and that undertow of you know, that came over on the ships, you know, that it got us through, you know, times of, you know, music allows us to transcend whatever we're going through, you know, whether it brings us joy or whether it's, you know, good memories or whatever. Music is so powerful. And you know that better than anyone, because
No, we all know that. The question is the delivery system. The music is there. The question is what else came.
right.
So that, I mean, you can take that blue note and you can use it to write over just about anything. I mean, the music of Bad Boy is infectious because of the rhythm, because of the pitch, because of, you know, you call Mary J. Blige the queen of hip hop soul. If she's writing those lyrics, or whoever's writing them, and she's writing them and delivering them over something other than what you're talking about. At the same time, that delivery system, again, cultural meaning making would mean that, yeah, Diddy and them did create in their moment. The question is, though, how does it connect to previous moments and future moments? And as well, what are they saying to mark that moment in time and space? You know, our students in my hip hop class in particular seem to have some general consensus that the 90s killed hip hop. And then the question is, was it ever alive? Of course. But I mean, it's interesting, again, the distinction. Every generation makes meaning. Every generation makes culture. That's that same blue note that Kendrick has, and They Not Like Us. And of course, as we see, the HBCU bands have taken it around. I saw a version that Grambling did last weekend, which was brilliant. Of course, those HBCU arrangers, those faculty and student arrangers, are going to make it pop. It pops better than the song because these are musicians. Not to say that Kendrick isn't a musician, because they are marking time. But again, what is it tapping into? What is it moving? And it was that blue note that carried that whole song. Now, what he's saying over it is clever. It's not brilliant. It's clever, but it's brilliant in the context of the time and space it's being delivered in. But if you're going to compare that to previous generations, which we have to, we're going to talk about culture for real, which is part of what we're going to talk about today as well, is the evisceration of memory. Can we even get any traction from memory? We don't have memory now. What we have is constant bombardment of stimuli. Then the question is, if you can't, why? And if you introduce something else that you can compare it to, now we can start talking about movement and memory. Oh, you never heard this. So I sent you this. If you know what, I don't know. Will we get a strike? You play about 30, 40 seconds of that on, I don't think anybody cares about Bobby Blue Bland.
Oh yeah. No, I'll find it, and we'll definitely.
Okay, no reason I ask, because you can hear the difference, or maybe the similarity and the difference between these three and what we heard in that blues performance, in the sense that, you know, it raises a fundamental question as we sit here on the last Saturday of September, as we sit here together, convened for number 238 in our session, and we ask ourselves, where are we in time and space, and what's going on? So for folks, everybody here, and I haven't pulled up the app yet. I'll pull up the app here on this other device. For Nubia and for the YouTube fam, everybody out there, you know, we have to ask ourselves, well, we don't have to do anything, but, you know, as we approach this first post-COVID, so to speak, post-COVID US presidential election, here we are. Where were we 4 years ago? we were just getting the smoke out of our nostrils. Oh, wonderful. Let's see.
I found it someplace where we don't have to worry.
Absolutely, of course. Perfect. Now, see, here's the thing. You don't have to play. If you can go back to about a minute and a half, because Don Cornelius, of course, as entertaining as that conversation is, because James Brown is talking about the genealogy between him and Bobby Blue Bland.
So you want to go back?
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Leave him talk a little bit, because here come BB King. Let's play about a minute of this, and let's listen to this, and with an ear toward the idea that these three are marking their moment in time and space, and then connecting to previous generations, as we heard her do. Well, let's just listen to it, see if we can hear the similarities and the differences. Thank you.
As everyone probably knows, this appearance was prompted by that fantastic album you fellas did together, and it's one of the greatest things I've ever heard, and I'd like to congratulate you both on it.
And they got no competition.
Huh?
They have no competition. No.
We're going to ask you to do, a kind of a medley. I know you don't do them the same way every time, but a medley similar to some of the things you did in the album.
For you,
all right?
We'll do anything. Right on.
BB, we thank you so much. All right, how about it for BB King and Bobby Bland? Come on back up here. That's the same way we did it a few months ago, so ain't no different. You do the thing. I think that we had a little. What were you talking about, B, at first?
Well, I was talking about lovers.
Lovers?
The world love lovers. The 3 L's: loving, laughing,
And what
living. Living.
Said I've had my fun.
Yeah.
If I don't get well no more, yeah. I said I've had my fun, people. If I never get well no more, I said my health is failing me. I think I'm going down slow. I don't want you to do nothing but just moan. Say,
Just moan.
Baby, Papa's got a brand new bag.
Baby, 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 baby.
Just open the door and I'll get it for myself.
Now, baby, baby, say it one more time.
Papa's got a brand new bag.
Now, what should I do right here? I don't know what love is, but I think I got it bad. But I think I got it bad. I know. Said I don't know. But I think I got a little bit of it bad. It ain't no fun in missing the things you want. But it's so bad when you miss a good thing that you once have had.
You completely made that lyric up. You say you don't miss what you never had. Now James Brown said you missed something you once have had. He made that. He stumbled into that lyric and resolved the tension in the middle. This complete improvisation to me. Now, both of those performances are cultural meaning making. Both of them tap into the same root. That second performance, I don't know. That is similar, but what's the distinction? Is there a distinction between them?
Listen, I only brought it up because
this is very, very valuable because both of them are very valuable.
We are in a space right now where we need the next generation, and I feel like there was a gap where
There was a gap.
We fell off. We forgot the assignment.
There was a gap.
And so now I'm just like, if we can keep, and this is what In Class with Carr has always been, you know, this opportunity for us to remember, bring us back to the source and take us forward so that we will never be here again where we're struggling to find, you know, our grounding as we, you know, set our freedom path permanently. And it needs to be permanent this time. I'm tired of starts and stops and fits and stops and starts and stops and starts and stops. I'm sick of it. Like, let's go. Pave the road and let's walk it together and get there, get to our destination. Tired
Do
of
you
being
think that's possible as a species?
I absolutely do. You say as a species, I think there's an evolution that has to happen in each of us.
Absolutely.
You know, and I feel like some of us have, you know, realize that we will never get there alone. That there is, you know, we take two steps back, you know, to go forward sometimes. And I feel like we've taken a lot of steps backwards. But fortunately, because we do have a momentum of memory that's in our DNA, we can spring forward a lot faster. We don't have to do the same things that got us to that point where we ended up back. I know I know what I'm feeling in this moment. And I'm also, Dr. Carr, extremely excited and optimistic. And, you know, that the stuff that we do, what we do Monday through Friday, what we do here on Saturday, I haven't seen that. And I've been around a while.
No, I haven't seen it. I haven't
been around a while, you know.
Haven't seen it either. Not like this.
And it's not us. It's everybody.
Well, that's it. It's us.
Saying, yes, this is a thing. You know, right now, you know, we have people on the YouTube side, you know, but the Nubia, I mean, come on, Nubia, like, you know, talking to the people from Michael Harriet, you know, who I've been talking with lately, and Dr. Black, and, you know, even being out, I was telling you, I've been invited to places now all of a sudden, you know, but everybody knows about
kid tables.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, y'all know I don't really.
You bringing your coolness with you, though. That's the thing, you know.
But it's also weird because I don't care to be there, you know.
Of course, that's yeah.
So, but it's wild to watch, you know, that shift happen too, because that's a shift.
Oh,
that's a shift.
It never. I mean, from never. It's never been like that. Huh?
Never.
Huh.
So what I'm saying is the relevance of the things that we're doing is resonating in a way that I couldn't even imagine. But I'm super happy about it because it says that the shift is towards something more real, less than being seen places and, you know, kikiing and rubbing elbows. It's like, yeah, there's work to be done. Are y'all ready to work?
Absolutely.
Let's go. Let's go.
We have to. Can I ask you, and shout out to our brother Lamont King for bringing this up yesterday. I hadn't thought about it. Mentioned we were talking about Roy's new show on CNN, and you know, when I brought up, Lamont was like, yeah, I'm proud of him because he's doing his own thing. And in my mind, the contrast between what Roy Wood is doing on CNN with his panel, and that's why when Lamont said that, he said he got his own panel. I thought, and Jon Stewart, do you see a distinction between them? Not a competition. I mean, if you're
well, I know a little bit more about that.
I'm sure. Yeah, of course.
I don't know. That's complicated. Look, if we can just talk about Roy Wood as a figure, with Junior, as somebody who is unbossed and unbought, you know, there was a lot of money on the table for him to stay, and he walked away from a steady gig.
Wow. Which is a whole lot for a black person in the world, boy. You know what I'm saying?
That never happens, Dr. Carr. I've never seen somebody go, you know, Dave Chappelle was like, okay, yeah, y'all can keep that money. I'm going to Africa. But it rarely happens, right? Where somebody's like, yeah, y'all not playing in my face. You know, I know my value. I'm out of here, you know, and respectfully, goodbye.
Respectfully, interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't nasty and acrimonious. He just was like, yeah, no, I'm too valuable for y'all to keep playing in my face. So I'm out. And the CNN thing, I believe, is going to be more of a stepping stone, but it's also his declaration of independence on many levels, because he doesn't have to do that either. You know, Roy Wood Jr. is brilliant and makes good money touring, and people
Right.
show up, and but he is so grounded in us. First of all, let me, I talk to a lot of people. That man is grounded in us.
Oh, it's no question.
Like there's
It's no
and
question.
smart. You know what I'm saying? Like, and
Yeah.
he knows things. Like he's not cosplaying. I love that about him.
Right. No, that's why I asked.
Yeah.
That's why I asked.
Let me get
To
out
get
of
that. Here we go with the echo again. Okay, here we go. Yeah, that's why I asked, because as somebody who only has the same vantage more or less than most people watching, made me think about, always through this Africana lens, who we are to each other and who we are in a social structure that defines us or tries to anyway from without, and that tension. And it was very interesting. By the way, I was looking for my this was the first iteration, right? Nubia, the new normal. And of course, we then very quickly brought out Nubia, the renewed normal, because this, like you say, we're returning to something if we can. I am eternally optimistic, because in this moment between this breath and this outward breath, that's the only thing we have. So in this moment, I'm optimistic because we are indeed making the road by walking it. As far as the long-term existence of the species in time and space, far less so. Only because these things have had trajectories. And the beautiful thing about life is we can always change. We can always change. The biggest threat facing the species is the existential threat of global warming. This is actually, let me see here. Yes, this is the latest issue of Harper's magazine during the height of the pandemic. Very interesting. Some folks from Harper's reached out to me, wanted me to write something for Harper's, and for a lot of people that would be considered, the call. You're waiting for that call.
Dr. Black said something really powerful on Monday. Shared with us, that, for 30 years he was at Clark Atlanta, and he'd go to these events, and, people, I'm from Harvard or I'm from Stanford, and he would feel a sense, he didn't use these words, but a sense of not belonging because he was at Clark Atlanta, and that doesn't exist anymore. Like all of the people with their bestsellers, he would feel a sense of like, why am I not at that level? And then he realized that he's at another level, that the accolades that people, writing for the Harpers or the New Yorkers or whatever, or the Atlantics, having these jobs at these prestigious places. The world has shifted, and 48, they had a larger enrollment than the white university in Atlanta. At Clark Atlanta had more people trying to get into Clark Atlanta than any school in Georgia. And I think it's because of him, because of that speech. And I'm like,
how do we read that?
I'm reading that
specific thing.
Yeah, well, that it touched people's souls. And if you are a young person trying to go to school to be something, you want to go somewhere where people are going to pour into you, see you, that the name on the school is not as important as the people there that are fighting for you, like you at Howard. It's not even about Howard, it's you. People come to Howard for you.
That's unfortunate.
I know, but
it's unfortunate for them to come there looking for him too, because what people who come very specifically like that with some sense of what that looks like come, and they realize is it ain't there
for everybody, right? Because you can only teach this many students,
or not even just for me. I think, and that's why I asked, because again, we think about this, and we'll get to this in the when we get into the science technology conceptual category, when we go into the Africana States 2.0, and shout out to everybody in Nubia on Monday nights. We'll be in week 3 next week. Jacob Carruthers brings this up in Science and Oppression, this ordinal classification, this normative framework by which everything is ranked. We saw the U.S. News and World Report rankings came out this week, And everyone, not everyone, many people decry the U.S. News and World Report rankings as they are scurrying around trying to improve their rankings. Howard is obsessed with the rankings, even as they claim that they're not. Of course they are. Spelman came out #1 this year, and it has been #1 as it boasted in its public relations campaign in the wake of the release earlier this week. This is the 18th year in a row. Howard was #2. I want to say Tuskegee tied with somebody for #3. A&T maybe, which is the highest ranked public institution. Spelman, Howard, and Tuskegee are private. Anyway, all of it should be irrelevant. It isn't. And so, and I'm grateful listening to you all back and forth, and every time you all sit in community on the radio, it sends shockwaves throughout. Imagine, were you surprised when the RZA called in?
Shocked. We're having this conversation and the call screen is like, RZA is, I'm like, RZA, RZ, okay, from Wu-Tang Clan. I was like, yeah, he wants to say, I was like, what? I was like, okay. Yeah, no, I was absolutely shocked. Because I don't ever think people are actually listening. I'm deep in the conversation that I'm having because it's fulfilling to me. You know what I'm saying? And I know we have an audience, and I know we have a vast audience, and I know it's amazing, but I don't think of specific people like KRS-One driving to North Carolina, calling up like on line 3. Like what? Or the first time it happened was Scarface just calling in. And I'm like, so I'm giving out the number and people are in their cars or wherever they are and they're calling in. And this time it was RZA. And, we're having a conversation about colorism. A grandmother called up to say that her grandson was being bullied because he was light skinned. In 2024, we're still having these conversations, which means that there's something going on in the homes of these children that are coming to school bullying somebody for being too light skinned in 2024 in America, Black. Like something's not right. That's what I'm saying. There's been a gap that we need to continue to fill and uplift and uphold. And that was really wild. And it was definitely a surprise.
Yes. No, I'm sure. And again, the dialogue within the first few seconds, when you were like, we're moving, we don't dwell on these things. And RZA was like, oh yeah, respect. Like automatically you set the tone when he came in. So, okay, now and then he just elevated the dialogue. It's that hard work. It's that hard work of reconnection. And when we think about it that way and do that kind of work, it makes it very different. And some folk in Nubia chat, and I'm looking at the YouTube chat, by the way. Oh, J Bags, I appreciate you in the YouTube chat. I did not realize this. Today marks the 33rd anniversary of you and the New Jack Scholars' final episode of Free Your Mind, September 28th, 1991 on WCKX FM. My goodness. Yeah. Columbus, Ohio. Power. Yes. What is WCKX FM? And I've told you that story before, how we would pay every week to go onto the air and do our Free Your Mind hour on Saturday mornings, counter programming Yo MTV Raps back in the early 90s, as you say, 1990, 1991. We didn't last long because they wasn't even ready for it then. So, after we did a 2-part episode on the politics of interracial relationships, and named all these prominent Black men married to white women, including at that time Black man who owned the radio station. That was our last broadcast. That was September the 28th, 1991. 33. Thanks, J Bags. I hadn't even thought about that. Free Your Mind. There are recordings of that, by the way. There's a full suite of cassettes. I think my set is in storage. That's how I ended up in Indianapolis. We ended up there because a brother named Charles Hankerson, who is an ancestor now, would order the tapes. He would mail to Columbus, send his money. We would send him the cassette tapes. And we had one of those Nation of Islam style, one cassette makes 3 other cassette bricks. And we would scurry back over from our broadcast at like 11 a.m. We would go back over to the African Center for Study and Worship, where there was a food co-op set up by the Kelsey family and all their comrades. And we would help with the food co-op, but we would also sell the tapes. And that's how we got the money to go back and pay the radio station for the following week. But
all right, you have an assignment, sir.
What's that?
You have to dig those out
Oh, I don't even know what. I'm sure there's maybe somebody. You know what? Bags may have them. If you got them, I may have to find them. You're right.
We have to digitize them, and then we have to make them available in Nubia.
Yeah. Well, that is wow. It's very young. That was 33 years ago. I was 26, 25, 26. That was my first year of graduate school. Actually, I finished law school, going off to graduate school, and it was let's just say it was unfettered fire. We used to call it. But anyway, Charles got them tapes and started spreading them around Indianapolis. People would send off for him, and that's when I got a call from a sister who was working for the Indianapolis Public Schools, who said, "We want you to come out and talk at our infusion conference, and also come back for Indiana Black Expo," which is when we sat with Tupac. And it was a very interesting conversation. And that's when I met Haile Gerima too, because Sankofa, remember, came out in 1993. And that was Mashariki Juwanza. So all of that came because, it's funny how these things come full circle. And thank you, Bags, for saying that, J Bags, for reminding me, because I had completely forgotten that date. We tend to just move forward, in terms of that. And I know you do that very, very well. Just what's the next thing? What's the next thing? They always ask Edward Kennedy Ellington, Duke Ellington, what's your favorite song that you composed? And Duke Ellington would say, the next one. He would always say, the next one, which is kind of counterintuitive for people who deal with memory. But if you've studied enough, this was the second ground rule of the 3 ground rules of intellectual work that these Philadelphia Freedom Schools teenagers basically dictated to me as we worked together to develop these ground rules, things that you have to do in intellectual work. One is show up and be present, meaning you got to be there, not just sitting there, but your eyes, your mind, your mouth, everything there, and be present in time and space, meaning bring your family, your community, your ancestors. The more you study, you bring all them, and be present in the future, bringing why are we talking about this? How's it going to impact the future? Be present. Read and write, which means listen and speak, which means repeat and improvise, meaning the memory, you have the momentum of memory to drive you forward. And that's where this one would fit, because I had forgotten that, but it allows, thanks to you, J Bags, allows for that remembering to connect to the fact that when you never stop implementing what you have learned, you don't have to have a conscious memory in the moment, because everything that's emptying forth is based on what you have apprenticed with. So those young people who are busting out the seams at Clark Atlanta to sit with Daniel Black, with Baba Omotosho, are receiving the benefit of everyone who has poured into him. Pop Normant, Mom Normant, all of his teachers, Sonia Sanchez, so many others, all of his family in Arkansas, all of his people in Georgia, all of the institutions he's built in Dugu and in Nzinga, all of the conversations he's now having in this space and with you, Karen, all of that now empties into these 18, 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-olds. And all was on display last May in that incredible, transformative, just few minutes he spent on the stage at commencement at Clark Atlanta. And so that momentum of memory does spill forth. And so what we were doing in the early 90s, coming as a direct result of what had been poured into us, even at that time, by Yosef Ben Yakin and John Henry Clark and Marimba Ani and Jacob Carruthers, and the list goes on. All that generation before us who had been poured into by the generation before them in terms of that Carruthers and them. So all of those folk came out then, and then now has just continued 3 and a third decades later into this space with all of the experiences in between. But the reason I said that it's not there at Howard, it's not there at Spelman, it's not there at Clark, it's not there at the HBCUs, and it's certainly not there at the HWCUs, including the Black Studies programs now under assault. Now at the Black cultural centers now under assault. The reason it's not at the university simply is because the institutions are set up to absorb that and repurpose it. In the case of the white schools, it's set up to absorb and repurpose in a way that neutralizes any political impact. Any notion that somehow this could be a problem. We saw what happened this week at Cornell. We talked about it a little bit on the radio yesterday. Mamadou Tall, Taal. Mamadou Tall is 30 years old. He's Continental African by way of the UK. He's a British citizen, and he participated in one of the Stop Killing the Palestinians BB marches and gatherings in the spring at Cornell. And they have now moved against him to expel him from school, which directly threatens, he's a third-year PhD student at Cornell, The Africana Studies Center, which of course was established by the great James Turner, who we've talked about many times, and one of those black spaces within white spaces. He's a third-year PhD student, and he teaches a seminar at Cornell, and his students have been sending letters to the administration, writing open letters saying he's a great teacher. We talk about everything in our class, and these aren't just black students. They're students, you name the demographic, they're in his classes. This class he teaches is called, What is Blackness? What is Blackness? Race and Processes of Racialization. Well, he's got an F1 student visa. And according to the terms of the F1 student visa, federal student visa program, he can be deported from being expelled. Shout out to punk ass Cornell University doing what it always does. But if you go looking for the thing that speaks to your soul at a university, you will find those who came there looking for it too. Not just students, but staff, not just students and staff, but faculty. And in those spaces, you can find something of that thing. When I say it is not there, what I mean is the institution is set up to, in the case of the white schools, neutralize it. And in the case of the black schools, to contain it enough to propel forward a very pragmatic view of black beingness, a very pragmatic view of existence and survival and progress, albeit incremental progress, although it will be couched in the language of quantum leap progress that won't be so off-putting that it will invite the kind of attention that could lead to the collapse of the institution. So, one thing that black institutions have become very good at is marketing the rhetoric of transformation and practicing the practice of conservative maintenance. So, and then conflating the two and mistaking the latter for the former and calling it black excellence. This isn't a critique. Let me be very clear about that. It isn't a critique. I work in black spaces. I chose to work in black spaces. And by that, I mean formal institutional spaces in this funky ass settler criminal enterprise called United States of America, called HBCUs, because they are a testament to black self-determination. And that does not mean, however, that they are the destination. They are a means to an end, and we can't conflate that. It is much better to be in spaces where we are convened around questions of our common humanity. Du Bois always understood this. For all of his critical analysis for HBCUs, he had a love for HBCUs. Although he was ensconced behind the Cotton Curtain, although he was ensconced in U.S. apartheid, which is why he never, except that 1 year, and they wouldn't let he and Nina and Baby Burghardt even live on campus. That 1 year, he was affiliated formally with the University of Pennsylvania, during which time he did the research and writing for the Philadelphia Negro. Except for that 1 year, he was at Wilberforce. In fact, I'm having my students reading his 1940 commencement address at Wilberforce, where he says, I came here, I was 26 years old. He says, when I came to Wilberforce, and here I am 40 years later, and I'm saying it has not become the place that it should be. Du Bois spent his life saying that black colleges needed to be something else, but he didn't spend it outside of black colleges saying that, which is why I wholly and roundly dismiss, in terms of a fundamental understanding of black colleges, I dismiss the scholarship of those who have never held the chalk at a HBCU. You have a lot of insight. It's very valuable, but you also don't know what you're talking about, you see. But at any rate, he did that while being on the inside. Wilberforce, Atlanta University. This is what Du Bois did. Not once, but twice at Atlanta University. He only, as a professor, served on a faculty. I don't count the University of Pennsylvania. He never taught there. He only served on a faculty at HBCUs. It's very important to understand that. Footnote, and then we'll go to the point now, thinking about this question of blood on the leaves, blood at the root, which is, of course, Billie Holiday. Very honored. Talk about being invited into spaces. There was a time when my time at Howard was very different in terms of how that time was spent. Now I spent time almost exclusively with students, teaching my classes, meeting like I was all day yesterday at Sankofa with students, office hours, just, being in conversation with them. This semester, 4 classes, hundreds of students. I got 200 in the intro class alone. And, you know, I've been doing that for many, many years. And but also in addition to that, when I was department chair for a dozen years, it was all that administrative stuff. And then there were meetings and there were initiatives beyond that, particularly under the 16th president, Sidney Rabeau. Man, I have a great deal of respect for a working class brother out of Detroit who would always say, shades of Roy Wood and Dave Chappelle walking away from money, Dr. Carr, it's hard to be poor in America. That's what you always say to me. I said, I know what you mean, Mr. President. He said, yeah, but if you ain't never been poor, you don't know what that means. I said, I know. I've been poor. You been poor? Yeah. Sidney Rabeau, one of the black men I knew was legit when, you know, we went to get something to eat and we both went in our right back pocket to pull out the bills. We never put all your money in one place. If you've been poor or if you ever been in a place where they might get you for your wallet, you know what I'm talking about. But at any rate, used to have to do a lot of work outside of the department, outside of all that now, fortunately, I've been relieved of, but I'm bringing that up because thinking about Du Bois's 1940 speech, he published that in the Journal of Negro Education. And I got actually an invitation a couple of weeks ago to give the Charles Thompson lecture for the School of Education. They do it every year, but this year they're going to do it at the Minor Building. The Minor Building has been restored. That used to be the DC Teachers College. That's where all the black school teachers in DC during segregation were trained. And so they asked me to give the Thompson lecture there, which is quite a request. Of course, I always said I'm honored to do it. But the reason I'm bringing it up now, and this is why in the footnote, is that speech, Dr. Du Bois's speech on what HBCUs must be, delivered at Wilberforce, where he had taught a generation before, 2 generations almost before, was published in the 1940 volume of the Journal of Negro Education, which was edited by the founding editor was Charles Thompson. So to give a talk and an annual lecture named for the man who was the founding editor of the Journal of Education, I think I'm going to start with Du Bois's speech at Wilberforce that was published in the Journal of Negro Education. I'll let everybody know when that date is, because it's going to be open to the public, and I think they also want to live stream it. So I'll let you all know, because I got to bake that. When something like that happens, I almost want to just drop everything else I'm doing and only work on that. But I'll figure out a way to fold it in. So the idea then that we come into these black spaces called HBCUs looking for that thing flies in the face of the reality that the social structure we live in is designed for that not to happen. And, you know, I have another student who I was talking with yesterday, he's working on several projects, and we were thinking about this question of conflict. And after I left the meeting, in terms of, you know, we talk about World War I, we talk about World War II. Of course, they weren't world wars. They were wars that involved much of the world because of the entreaties of European countries on other European countries. And in the case of World War II, of course, Japan and China got pulled in as well. Japan pulled China in. But question is, when you talk about World War, how broad out do you take your lens to encompass a world, realizing that a world is not a globe. A globe, of course, is the geographical manifestation, the orb, the sphere, the oblong sphere. We talk about the rotation of the earth. But when we say earth and globe, that's closer together. You say world, that's a concept. Third world, Harlem world, whatever. When you say world war, you're talking about something that is very flexible. But if you take it as a definition, it's something that involves more than one continent, that involves more than one group of people, that involves more than just a small territory, but encompasses a whole lot of other people, and in a way, something that affects either directly or indirectly everybody on the ball, or so many people on the ball that it might as well be the whole ball, then maybe is there a case to be made that the human trafficking, the assault on the continent of Africa from without by everyone, could be marked in terms of the contemporary moment, the last 5 centuries or so, as the First World War. As the First World War. If the attack on Africans, because then some people say, we can't say that because they weren't nation states. Well, no, they were nation states in Europe, and they knew what they were doing. Isn't that right, Holland? Isn't that right, Spain? Isn't that right, Portugal? Isn't that right, England and France? You knew what you were doing. You know what you were doing. You're not the caliphate in the east part, right? You're not what you might call Iraq now, but might have called Persia then, Iraq or Iran. You're not, they were Muslims and it transcended, But no, you were nation states. Now, is Songhai a state? It's an empire. It's a form of state for sure. But don't conflate what European countries were with what was going on in Africa. This is our friend and brother as he talked to us, and including that time in Nubia, Howard French, and Born in Blackness, saying, this forestalled development of state structure in Africa goes a long way toward potentially explaining what happened in Africa. What Walter Rodney would say is the underdevelopment of Africa, because there wasn't a state by state contest. If England had come sailing them funky ass boats, if Holland had come sailing their funky ass boats into a coast where there were states in Africa, we wouldn't be having this conversation, much less in English. But anyway, maybe that's the First World War. But what is the underlying question, which, kind of brings us to the theme today, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, is the question of violence. State violence, settler violence, have you want to conflict violence, and how we solve it with a spirit of optimism born from the fact that we are in the living now. Anytime we are experiencing this on Saturdays, for those of us who are live and gathered here, throughout the week for those who are coming after we've done it live. If you come in here if you're watching this on a Thursday, if you're thinking about it on a Wednesday night or 4 day in the morning on a Friday or late Friday night, want to make sure you did this before we go back live again Saturday, then that is your now. That is our now. And that is the value and the power of the living now. It is always optimistic. We breathe. Ta-Nehisi Coates is an atheist. I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm saying it as an observation, because it's one that he has made, obviously, about himself. This is the latest issue of New York Magazine. It just came out, called The Return of Ta-Nehisi Coates. Now, if anybody knows Ta-Nehisi, he never went anywhere. But what they're saying is this is the latest blockbuster designed to kind of shake things up. And here is the headline for Rue Spaeth, who is an editor at New York Magazine, not the New Yorker, but New York Magazine. A decade after the case for reparations, he is ready to take on Israel, Palestine, and the American media. On the 1st of October, Ta-Nehisi's new book comes out. And next Saturday, which is 2 days before the 1-year anniversary of the attack by Hamas on the concert in Israel, we're going to talk about that book. I will have finished reading it, and we're going to comment on it. The name of his book is The Message. Yeah, like Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. The Message. Broken glass everywhere. What kind of world? What do you mean by world war? Blood on the leaves, meaning blood in the Bronx, blood in Gaza, West Bank, increasingly with the mass murderers of the Israeli Defense Force, blood in Lebanon. Blood in the pockets of people with pagers, blood on the now lifeless hands of a child taking a pager to her father when it explodes, indefensible murderers. Blood at the concert, blood in the hidden tunnels, blood on the leaves, but blood at the root, as Billie Holiday reminded us at Cafe Society that day in 1933 when she first sang Strange Fruit. Blood at the root is something different. Blood at the root might be the blood of a lynched person's body as it's hitting the tree, the root of the tree, or blood might be how the tree grew out the ground, nourished by blood, like the United States of America, a settler colony, the same as Israel and different than Israel, the same as Israel in the sense of displacing people who are already there, the indigenous people. And in reading the excerpts from Ta-Nehisi's book, next week we're going to talk about this. The idea that he says, when I was traveling in the West Bank, couldn't go to Gaza because they wouldn't guarantee safety and they wouldn't let him go. But he said, I'm walking through this and you know what was hitting me? This right here. This is the experience of my grandparents. This is the experience of my grandparents. This is the experience of their grandparents. This is the experience. This is a glimpse of what enslavement was. And this is the experience of my father. It's Paul's experience. Why? Because it's also first-class citizens, second-class citizens. We need a two-state solution. You've opened your mouth and put your intent on display, or ignorance. Why can't every human being in Israel have equal voting rights? Can't do that. Why? Because we want an ethno-state. You Palestinians, I don't care you came out your mother's womb here. You'll never be a full citizen. You're a second-class, at best, citizen. We're always looking at you as suspicion. So Ta-Nehisi said, I'm walking in here thinking, Black in America during my father's generation, which had legal apartheid when he was a kid, even though he grew up in Philly, his people from the South. This is the apartheid. This is why James Earl Carter wrote Peace, Not Apartheid. Peace, not apartheid, is said here in the United States. But the whole point being that it's very similar, and that's also very different, because protestations that this was the ancestral homeland of the Hebrews, notwithstanding, Benedict Anderson might talk about that as an imagined community, but imagination has powerful force when you can animate it with a fist and a gun and maybe a bunch of money from the Brits, and then backed up by the United Nations and Ralph Bunche and them, and suborned by the United States of America and other European countries. And I say other European countries in the sense that the framework for the United States came from their parents in Europe. Well, then you can turn an idea into a material reality. But it nevertheless does not displace the fact that these people were being persecuted. By these people, I mean those who we would typically label the Jews. But of course, if you say the Jews, it then very quickly breaks down into Jews of what origin? Because you got a lot of Falasha, Ethiopian Jews. They're not from the ancestry as BB's father's ancestry is from Poland. You can change your name and come into the space. No, these are the Ethiopian Jews, the Falasha Jews, the first people to practice Judaism, the first of the Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Don't get cute, because we know from the Ethiopian Jews what the experience is to be an Ethiopian Jew in Israel. But I am a Jew. And so, yes, the Palestinians are second-class citizens. Maybe third class, because I think I might be second class. Because remember, you threw my blood away when they had the AIDS crisis. You said that we came in here and brought AIDS in our blood. Yeah, kind of like how you treated our kin halfway around the globe, who we never thought about as kin before. And then we realized that while we're in Ethiopia saying, I'm not Black, I'm Ethiopian, and they're in Haiti saying, I'm not Black, I'm Haitian, we're all Black. Why? Because you threw the Haitian blood away too. Didn't you remember that in the United States? Springfield ain't the first time you tried to demonize the Haitian. Hell, you can all go to hell when it comes to this issue. So Ta-Nehisi is walking around in West Bank, can't get to Gaza, says it's very familiar. But the message isn't just about Palestine and Israel, although that's what's on the front cover of New York Magazine this month. It's also about South Carolina, where he went, where a teacher had been harassed because they wanted to teach between the world and me and the school board, and the principal said, nah, you can't do that. So it's about South Carolina, where he goes there and makes some connections. And it's also about Senegal. He spent some time in Gorée Island. He's not the first, won't be the last. Clint Smith's book, When the Word is Passed. Now, I love how white publishers do this. This book, for the first time, okay, you've opened your mouth and vomited out the tiny brain that was somewhere floating around in that skull. And you've put on display what you don't know. You know how long we've been talking about Gorée Island since the first person got put there? You know how long we've been comparing what happened at Gorée and what has been here since the first person got here? You know how long we've been writing about it? Go back to the 19th century. Don't get cute. You've now shown the world what you don't know. But no, what you really shown to know what the world is in your game of who is the next Negro we will anoint. You are engaged in what white publishers often do, which is the pick-me sweepstakes. And no shade on the people, because if you like Ta-Nehisi Coates, which is why they spend a great deal of this article writing about the career he's endangering by talking about Israel and Palestine, and to my count, having read it twice, the long article, maybe once in one paragraph after it was stated at the onset, coming back to Senegal, not even to South Carolina, which was stated once and then abandoned forever in the article, because the only thing important, of course, was Israel and Palestine. But you want to dance that dance? Ta-Nehisi is more than up to the task, which is why you got to read the book, not the review of the book. And we're going to talk about this next week. It's saying he's endangering his career. He's endangering his reputation. He's in and the whole article is talking about all these pick-me places he has been and how he tried to walk away from it. And he calling this this discussion of Palestine an obsession, like his obsession with the Civil War, an obsession with it. It's very interesting to me, and how the politics of the Atlantic went down, how he left the Atlantic, all this. It's very interesting. I'm going to read the last paragraph as we move on. Again, got blood on the leaves, blood at the root. Again, the theme being the world is bloody right now. It's been bloody for a long time. Some people would say it's been bloody since there have been human beings, and I don't know that you could necessarily make a case against that. You know, there's not enough hours in the day, y'all. As I thought a long time, as those of us in Nubia know, I thought about this a long time in this second iteration of Introduction to Africana Studies, particularly in this so-called election season now. How to approach this. I spent a long time with modern system, global systems theory and world history, which I spent the last almost 40 years doing that. But coming back, why? Because I don't know that you can get your whole hands, arms, minds, souls around the global concept of a we. But I'm going to try like hell to at least help contribute to the conversation that only works, as you said, Prof, when we all participate in it. But in that process, you know, I understand very much Ta-Nehisi Coates' process, which is he immerses himself in a subject. Now, the word they use here is obsessed. Okay. Here's the last paragraph of the article. It's a long article in the September 23rd to October 6th edition of New York Magazine. It says, in retrospect, one can see this fear. Oh, wait, no, I can't do that. I had to read the paragraph before. Professor Hunter, every week has been transformative for me in our conversation. And now every day as our relationship has deepened, and, you know, the love and respect, you can't really transcend, you can't get any deeper or higher I have for you, and thanks and gratitude in that, you know, it really has.
Same.
Yeah. And that's what I'm grateful for, that it is the same. It's reciprocal, flows from heart to heart and breast to breast, as old folks used to say in church. And I tell you, but and every new conversation we enter, it's like it's a new level, because I'm like, I knew generally what, you know, I wanted to contribute to our conversation today. And then you played that video and you start sharing what your week has been, and then the weeks that preceded, just a little taste. And I'm like, see, and I realize now, you know, we all have our things. When I start locking back like this and rocking, I'm thinking, I can't, it's like we doing office hours. If you start talking, I'm like, man, let me say, and you set me into a thing, and I now have to really be very careful, because this is real time and we're live and we don't filter, but at the same time, want to be clear and precise about what we're going to do. And so I'm looking at this article, which I hadn't planned to talk much about. Again, I'm thinking in my mind, the book comes out on the 1st. I'll have it read by the 2nd, and then we're going to talk about it next Saturday in the context of what's going on in the world. But I'm going to read this. I hadn't planned on reading it. This is what Ta-Nehisi Coates says, because he caught a lot of flack for comparing Malcolm X to Barack Obama. My man Cornel West gave him a lot of flack for that, and he should have. You know, comparison. Well, they're both black males, yeah. But the idea that somehow Obama is like a manifestation or an extension of Malcolm X is patently absurd. Malcolm X would never run for president of the United States. But then again, prophets don't run for president either. So there's a lot of contradictions. Sorry, Cornel. But the point is this. He says this. He says, after observing the Democratic National Convention, where everybody was talking about, he mentioned Steve Kerr saying, you know, how impressed he was with the diversity of the speakers. And he says, you know, we're dying, having a ball. He said to his friends on the group chat, and Steve Kerr comes up and says, oh yeah, this convention is so black, they had to get a basketball coach to be the white dude. But what wasn't allowed to speak was a Palestinian, as we talked about. And so Ta-Nehisi's bothered about that. And he said, I saw people invoke Fannie Lou Hamer, and I saw people invoke Shirley Chisholm, and I saw a tribute to Jesse Jackson. And then I would be outside with these Palestinian Americans and sympathizers to Palestinian Americans, and I would see that they had no place. Because remember, Fannie Hamer was not in the hall to be paid tribute to. Fannie Hamer was outside, and then had before the Rules Committee. So he's making all these connections. Can't wait to read how he theorizes all this. Although this won't be in the book, obviously. The book was printed before the convention. But he says this, he says, I have a deep-seated fear, he told me, of course, being the writer, Hugh Spaeth. He says that the Black struggle will ultimately, at its root, really just be about narrow Black interest. And I don't think that is in the tradition of what our most celebrated thinkers have told the world. I don't think that's how Martin Luther King thought about the Black struggle. We know that because in Nubia, we read and discussed for weeks, where do we go from here, chaos or community? Remember that chapter, The World House? We know Martin Luther King. So he says, I don't think. No, you don't have to say you don't think. We know. He says, I know that's not how Du Bois thought about the Black struggle. Absolutely. Remember when we read together The Education of Black People, 10 separate essays. And we're going to return to Du Bois in this next iteration of Introduction to Africana Studies as we continue to get deeper into the course. Next week, next Monday night, week 3. Next sentence, he says, I know that's not how Baldwin thought about the Black struggle. Should it turn out that we have our first Black woman president, our first South Asian president, and we continue to export 2,000-pound bombs to perpetrate a genocide? Shout out to Bernie Sanders, who introduced legislation this week in the United States Senate, but of course it wasn't going anywhere. And now they've all taken a break because they're going to campaign season to stop sending bombs to Israel. He says, I won't be able to just sit here and shake my head and say, well, that is unfortunate. I'm going to do what I can in the time that remains and the writing that I have to not allow that to be, because that is existential death for the Black struggle and for Black people, as far as I'm concerned. It's very interesting because this guy presses him for solutions. He says, well, I don't have solutions. I'm doing as close an analysis as I can. I'm listening, but I don't have solutions. In fact, he says that when he was pressed on his article on the case for reparations, he says his editor was like, I was trying to push him in the direction of, well, how would this actually work in practice? And he shrewdly was like, well, I'm not going to get into that. Hey, I ain't mad at him. Go ahead, please jump on in, please, Bri.
It bothers me when a journalist inserts himself into the story. We know you interviewed him because your name is on the byline. You don't have to say when I asked him or when he told me. That should be presumed. But it's this form of journalism that puts the journalist in the room as if we don't need to know. It's not about you. And I hate that. It's so prevalent now that most people don't even notice it, but it's like nails on a chalkboard. When you read that sentence, he told me, we know, I tell my students this, we know you interviewed them. Your name is on the byline. And when we see a quote, we know that quote came from a question that you asked. You don't need to insert yourself. To me, that's not journalism. That's something else. And it's so common now that we don't even notice it. And I'm sure most editors don't even check for it. I do, but that just, hate that.
What is that about, Prof? This is, and hey, y'all, again, this is very organic, but I swear this is the most fire classroom in the universe. What? Teach us, what are you seeing there? Not only as a thinker, but as a practitioner. What's going on there?
That you have crossed the wall. You have crossed the wall from being a journalist, which is the person that's on the outside asking these questions, extracting these answers, and then disseminating it to the audience, right? To now having to be the person, like I always say, when you say I, me, and my, I don't allow my students to put I, me, and my in any story. If you can't write a story, even when I was doing a column, which had my little face on it, the desire to insert myself, it was about the facts. Yes, I'm pushing you towards a view. That's what a column, editorial writing and columnist, you're pushing at people towards a view, but you're doing it with facts. So I don't even need to be in it. The facts should speak for themselves, right? So I very rarely would say when I did this or when I saw this or me or my or any. So I never let my students put themselves in, because if you can't write without putting yourself in, then it's no longer really journalism, something else, right? So wow. I hate that. I hate that. I'm sure this person's a great writer, but I'm like, why'd you need to say when I asked him or when he told me? Why was that necessary?
Interesting. Yeah, I get the impression. And first of all, thank you. Again, this is the invaluable real estate, to use a capitalist term, that we inhabit here in these spaces. Because what we just heard and you walk us through, there are a lot of folks who write who are gathered here. There are folks who teach writing. There are folks who are in school to learn how to write. There are folks who are in school to teach people how to write. And these moments enhance our capacity to do all of those things. And for folks who might not have the resources to sign up for a subscription in Knarrative at this moment, at this time, but who have access to a cell phone or a laptop or some kind of piece of computer that's got internet access, you can pay for that, because that's the purest nature of what we're doing. That's why we say we've jailbroken the Black college, we've jailbroken the university. They must be jailbroken so that Dan Black speaks freely wherever he is. Sam Livingston, Catherine Adams speak freely wherever they are. Mario Beatty speaks freely wherever he is. Lethea Watkins speaks freely wherever she is. All of our colleagues and comrades at HBCUs, Corey Claiborne, Tanya Clark, speak freely wherever they are. Nate Norman speak freely wherever they are. However, this space is a space that not only empties into the freedom of speech in terms of our capacity to see the world as it is and for what it is, it also can translate into the freedom of taking action beyond the fundamental grounding first action of thinking. That's why this space is. It's a thinking space, but it leads, as Brother Jelani, shout out Baba Jelani for Monday night in office hours, as you begin to think out how these spaces that we have collectively can connect to and have started to connect to and have begun to grow in connection with other spaces that lead to other types of action and extensions of the actions that we do. Jelani, I thought that, I think all of us who were there on Monday night in Nubia, your observation of the power of our collective study to feed pockets of study groups and formations was brilliant. I've been thinking about that a lot. We're going to talk some more about that in the second hour on Monday night in office hours. But in that space, Prof, what you're doing, what you just did with us again there, even for somebody who doesn't know, I wouldn't know where to start. A lot of people didn't know the distinction. The journalist, and then what is a column? What does a column do? Oh, I see. You put your, you don't need to use first person singular. No, in fact, I tell my students not to. Okay, let me try my hand at not doing it. You got to develop the ideas and the capacity and the skill to communicate it in that language. It's very important. And so, yeah, he interjects himself in this article, and I think in part because they are interested in one primary subject here. That's Israel-Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
Ta-Nehisi's not interested in only Israel-Palestine. His book is not about Israel-Palestine only. It's about larger, deeper themes, which they echo toward, but they got to bring it all the way back around to this, which is why when Lamont brought up, how Roy Wood's thing is different than Jon Stewart's thing, the thing that it made me think about is I watched Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart put natural fire on the mass murderer, Bibi Netanyahu, the other day on his Monday night lecture on The Daily Show. And I watched Roy Wood, and we played a clip from Brother Roy on the radio yesterday. And I think to myself as I'm listening, here's a brother, and we won't engage in comparative brilliance. We'll just say that Roy Wood is brilliant. Thank you, Prof, at the onset of this for saying, no, let me talk about Roy. And for me, thinking about it with this Africana lens, I'm thinking in a governance formation, Roy Wood is going to say a certain thing. In a social structure formation, he might say that same thing, but say it differently or craft it differently. Jon Stewart, as a white man, can say what he said Monday night about the mass murdering Bibi Netanyahu and even figure out ways to crack jokes that could come back around to make the acid point he made. I'm saying Roy Wood sitting in that chair couldn't talk like Jon Stewart. See, the race thing is real, friends. And when you're walking on a razor's edge, whether it be Ta-Nehisi Coates getting ready to poke the bear on this question and being led in key conversation into what will undoubtedly be a buzzsaw. Because then I went out after I got this the other day, this article, and started reading some other articles, including the excoriating criticism he's already received from the Zionist press. And I'm saying, man, I ain't mad at this brother. Ta-Nehisi, atheist. He said, I stopped at the checkpoint, Israeli soldier with his sunglasses gleaming at me like he was a Georgia sheriff, the mirrored sunglasses. See, these are the same killers. They're brothers, which is his point. He asked me, are you Christian or you Jew? You're a Muslim. He asked me that. I got a U.S. passport. That passport don't mean nothing, just like that blood in the veins of Haitians or Ethiopians don't mean nothing. You black, sir. And he said in that moment, that's what I'm saying. This is the same thing. And it isn't Ta-Nehisi who has said this before, of course, many times, but it was the editor who injected. It was a strange question to ask an atheist. It wasn't a strange question to ask a black man. There's no right answer to that. The fact that he came up and asked him the question, I mean, he had already made the observation with his funky sunglass hidden eyeballs that this man is a problem. Maybe you wouldn't be a problem, but Ta-Nehisi is a problem. Last paragraph, the one I was going to read originally, but then I wanted to read that fear paragraph first, because the idea somehow that black people can fold themselves into the four corners of this funky criminal enterprise in the United States and think somehow we're safe. No, the existential threat to the species at this point, 2 words, friends: global warming. Our deepest sympathy, our deepest concern for everybody being slammed at this point with the latest hurricane. And we not even halfway through the alphabet. Remember, Katrina was K. So understand, as the storms continue to form. In fact, there's a very interesting thing. Lewis Lapham, who was the editor, founding editor of Harper's, then came back and edited. Lewis Lapham made transition about 2 months ago in Rome. This is the editor. Those of you may be familiar with the columnist, the writer, the editor, Lewis Lapham, who after he left the Harper's the second time, founded something called Lapham's Quarterly. I recommend it. Lapham's Quarterly is basically a compendium of information. He introduced this when he came back to Harper's, which is a page they always print in Harper's, which is something called Harper's Index. Many of y'all read Harper's Index if you read Harper's Magazine. The index is a compendium of statistics. Let me read you a couple. Portion of Palestinians in Gaza and West Bank who say that Hamas's decision to attack Israel on October 7th was correct. 2/3. Minimum percentage of Gazans who have lost a family member in the Israel-Hamas war, 60. That's the minimum percent, 60% of the people there. Percentage of Israeli Jews who say that Gazans should have the right to self-governance. That will be 8%. Who say that Israel's use of military force in Gaza has gone too far. That will be 4, not 40, 4%. Who say it has not gone far enough. 42%. See, this is only going to stop when you take their guns. It's only going to stop when you take their bombs. Who is they? Everybody with a gun or a bomb. You saying the Jews? I'm saying the Israelis and the Palestinians, except now Israel has expanded their killing. They bomb in Lebanon. They killing so many people, it's not even funny. But the existential threat to somebody who got killed with a bomb was the bomb. The existential threat for the rest of us is global warming. This is, I don't think I have it at easy reach tip of my, let me see, my bag is in the other room, so I'm not going to look for it. I don't think I have it here, but yeah, I mentioned this yesterday when we were on the radio. The new president of Senegal was saying that this global warming thing is a problem because it's affecting Africa and we didn't have nothing to do with it. So you all have an obligation. He said it to the UN this week, it's UN week. And he gave this interview to Financial Times in Dakar. He said, you all got to help us in terms of developing our technological capacity, our grid and everything to go to the renewable energy sources. We can skip over some of the stuff that you all went through in the Industrial Revolution, all that nasty coal and oil and stuff. Remember, we had that bit of that conversation yesterday morning on the radio about what it would take and how it's still a gap there in terms of innovation and how you can meet the gap, maybe with public subsidy and what that might look like. But they're saying in Africa, it's killing us now. But guess what? It's killing people all over the world. That's the existential threat. Harper says this in the index. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Minimum decrease in estimated number of U.S. companies. Estimated number of U.S. counties without any foreign-born residents, 15. Counties. Out of all the counties in the United States, only 15. Percentage by which male immigrants to the United States are less likely to be incarcerated than American-born men. That will be 60%. You want immigrants if you don't want people in jail. By which immigrants to the United States are more likely than American-born citizens to start businesses. That will be 80%. Although I think it's interesting because like your father, Prof, like your family, I think a lot of times when we think of immigrants, we only say people who came to the United States from other countries. I like to include as African people, since we were the largest forced immigrants in this funky settler colony, those who moved from the U.S. South to the U.S. North. How many of them people started businesses? If you go back 1, 2, 3 generations, and when you fold that number in, you'll realize that perhaps we should begin to reimagine how we have this relationship with this enterprise, even as you hold on to your passports, because citizenship is still the gold standard of humanity in the world, unless you live in Israel. Let me see. Percentage by which I'm looking for something in particular on this question of the weather. Here we are. Here we are. Number of U.S. weather disasters in the 1980s whose inflation-adjusted damages exceeded $1 billion. There were 33 of those disasters in the decade of the 1980s. Minimum number of such disasters that have occurred since January 2023. That will be 47. The whole point I'm making here is that the existential threat to the species is global warming. But these people in this election, on one side, saying it ain't no threat, it ain't even real. And when everything gets used up, you know, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos going to be on the moon or Mars, and the rest of us going to be out here fighting it out if there's still a species left. But what I'm raising is that you can talk about those kind of things because they seem to be abstract, even though they are not. Jon Stewart can go after Israel very critically. Roy Wood can't talk like Jon Stewart because there's still a thing in this country, in this world, that prevents that. And so we have to think about the blood on the leaves, which is the violence in the entire world, but the blood at the root might be nourishing those very same leaves the blood is on. Maybe the blood isn't on the leaves because it was spattered from without, but the blood is on the leaves because it's sweating from within. So this social structure, this whole tree, watered with blood, not with the blood of patriots. Sorry, you don't tread on me, flag waving January 6th insurrectionists who, if Donald Trump gets back in, will be given probably the Presidential Medal of Freedom and called patriots. No, it's not outside the realm of possibility. In fact, you could say that it is likely. Maybe Harper's will have, if they're still printing, have an example in their index of number of traitors in the United States that got a Presidential Medal of Freedom, and they'll say prior to 2025, 0. After 2025, how many people from January 6th climbed the wall? They all got medals, including Ashley Babbitt posthumously. Don't play at this point, or play. This is for the people who say, I ain't voting, both parties are the same, opening your mouth and vomiting out the fact that you have been deeply miseducated. So, you know, we saw this week in California. The governor vetoed the reparations bill that did make it to his desk, but we knew Gavin Newsom was going to do that. We know that there's not going to be fairness. And when Ta-Nehisi said, you know, I don't have an answer, he's raising the question, which is valuable. But here, we're also floating possible answers because we can't afford not to. And there are people like Dr. King in the last chapter, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, who absolutely put an answer out, one that could reconcile some of the contradictions of being in the United States with the possibilities of human community living together, regardless under which flag you're doing it. So I'll read this last paragraph. We'll continue. So he says, I have this deep-seated fear that Black people are going to narrow the struggle just to Black people in the United States, which fortunately this attack by these white nationalists of all backgrounds. Last I checked, you go back 2 or 3 generations, Junior Varsity Vance and Donald John Trump, neither one of y'all's people were here. Don't get cute with us. The Haitians were in the hemisphere, although not by choice. Your punk ass grandfather was not. Anyway, says, both of them, and your grandmammy too. I'm sorry, see, that's, calm down. That's my mama. See, my mama get mad. She said, you know, old Black women call you mammy in a minute. Yeah, her mammy. Whoa, here we go. Usually reserved for white women, though. So anyway, let's get usually reserved for white women. Black women of a certain age, just their capacity for shade unmatched in human history, I don't think. Until you go to Africa and realize, oh, that's your cousin. All of y'all talk like that. Oh, it's beautiful. Anyway, usually delivered with a teeth suck in the Caribbean and in the continent of Africa. All right. He says, in retrospect, one can see this fear laced throughout all of Coates's work about the first Black president. And in his hands, the story of Israel is a cautionary tale of the corrupting influence of power, a warning to the oppressed who might dream one day of exerting their will over an otherwise unkind world. As he explains in the message, the name Ta-Nehisi which can be translated as land of the blacks. That's absolutely correct. But if you took Mario Beatty's class, you know that. Ta means land. Nehesi is a word that you often see referred to Nubia, to the Nubians, which actually then would not be blacks as such. But anyway, we don't get into that. Nebu, well, no, we're not going to get into that. Ta-Nehisi can be translated as land of the blacks. In reference to, now watch this. This is what the editor writes now. I hope I got to read the book now to see if Ta-Nehisi wrote this. If so, it's a little disappointing. But this is what the editor writes, the non-black editor. His name, Ta-Nehisi, can be translated as land of the blacks. He has that in quotation marks. And he says, in reference to an ancient Nubian kingdom that black nationalists of his parents' generation spoke of with longing. I'm not of his parents' generation. Ryu. What kind of name is Ryu? R-Y-U. Space. I ain't asking about you. Do you long for your ancestors? Do you long for some? Anybody longing for Nubia? We learned our language. Why? Because as Jake Cruz said, we're going to break the chain that separates your ideas from our ideas, and we're going to speak to our ancestors without interpreters. Longing for long. Go to hell. Now, this is Ta-Nehisi. Quote. He says, we were born not to be slaves, but to be royalty, he writes. Okay. We're gonna deal with the book next week. I just say this in here. Every time we go to Kemet, we're in the pyramids, the tombs, the temples, and we are constantly reminding that while these pyramids are impressive, we would have been the ones pulling the stones on these pyramids. We would have been sitting with the pharaoh drinking whatever they were drinking. Class is a thing that goes all the way back, and we're not studying classical Africa to become some type of romanticized, valorized version of the past. We're learning the lessons we can learn, not only from the archetypes, but also from the society. That's why we go to Set Ma'at, the place the Arabs call Deir el-Medina, the workers' village, the workers who went on strike. Come on, Tanaz. I'm going to get a brother the benefit of the doubt till I read the actual rest of the language. But he says, we were born not to be slaves, but to be royalty. He writes, quote, that explains our veneration of black pharaohs in African kingdoms. It absolutely does not, but it's okay. We'll come back. He says, the point was to craft a different story than the one imposed on us. An understandable response, but one that I've never made peace with, end quote. This is where the limits of knowledge. Patahotep says the limits of one knowledge are not reached. All that studying reparations, all that studying Obama, all that studying Israel, Palestine, all that studying Senegal, South Carolina, growing up in a space named with a Kemetic name. A few more books, maybe some time in some other spaces, and it'll finally dawn on you that you don't have to be comfortable with something that was never the objective. Because what you have now written, that these key white publishers and televisions, I don't care whether it's Chris Hayes on MSNBC or Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. Maybe Roy get a little different take on it when you come, if you come at all, to CNN for the conversation after the book comes out. But them people are very comfortable with the idea somehow we romanticize the African past. We do not. Now, if you want to switch it over and start talking about everything from Cinderella to Beowulf, then you might want to, you can point it to people who valorize the past, friend. Oh, let me stop. Everybody calm down. All right, here we go. The point is this: death, spectacle, numbness. We are in a moment where these things can threaten to overwhelm us. And that's where I want to turn to as we kind of end with this last little, maybe third of what we've been talking about today. In session 34, when we were together, all together in 34 in class, that was right after the election of 2020. Right after the election of 2020. And in session 34, we talked about, remember, Prof, after a summer of outright street combat, protests, tear gas, this fool walking across to the church with an upside down Bible and that little toady William Barr, names that seem like they are ancient names now because of how quickly our memories evaporate behind them, and the military, and I have them cast and wrote memoirs now talking about how they disagreed. You didn't disagree that day. I saw that with my own damn eyes. And then the election of November, and then every radical in the country that could get there in Georgia to drag John Ossoff and drag Reverend Warnock across the finish line. The Atlanta Dream boycotting. Get rid of our owner, Kelly Loeffler, the senator who must be defeated. Come on, sisters. You talk about a courageous stand. After all that, and the incremental victories, and I need 80,000 votes, and no, and oh, what the hell? And then after that, two things happened. Number one, we was tired as hell. So we had a session called the Power to Pause. The summer of the reckoning was behind us. 4 short years ago this season. It is now the fall. The other thing that happened, them Klansmen went to the drawing board. Okay, we need to throw all these people off the roll. 750,000 put off the roll since the beginning of this year in North Carolina alone. Okay, we got to make sure. Okay, let's start invalidating them, Nebraska, Oklahoma. Let's start invalidating them, Georgia. Let's start purging them as Greg Palast walked you through, and looking forward again to us having, that's today, isn't it, Rob?
Yep. And we are doing, Nubia is going to have a watch session of Greg Palast's documentary tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Not today, tomorrow. I'm sorry. Thank you. Actually, tomorrow at noon, I think, right? Tomorrow at noon. Tomorrow at noon. We're going to be watching it together in Nubia. By the way, today at 6:30, I'll mention this by passing, even as we mark the execution by the unprincipled, anti-human, devilish governor of Missouri and the cabal that enabled him, including the punk-ass Supreme Court of the United States, including the blackface white supremacist Clarence Thomas, who in all fairness believes that everybody should be put to death in prison, damn near. If you read Corey Robbins' book, The Enigma of Clarence Thomas, Marcellus Williams, Imam Khalifa Williams, of course, murdered. And whatever political differences I might have with a Wesley Bell in his political campaign, aided by AIPAC, and more than aided, abetted by AIPAC, more than aided and abetted, completely funded damn near by AIPAC to defeat Cori Bush. I will say that as the county prosecutor in St. Louis, who, although it wasn't his office when he was in charge that convicted Khalifa Williams, it was absolutely his office that went in, revisited the case, said, no, there was no DNA on the weapon. The witnesses have recanted and they have died. No, this guy can't do it. We want that withdrawn. The prosecutor said withdraw it. But all them hillbillies had blood in their mouth, blood at the root and blood on the leaves. We're going to kill this man. And so they did this week. And the hell you would burn in, I would say go there, but you already live there because you are in fact a spawn of Satan. Political spawn of Satan. Let me make very clear about that. But another brother who got the death penalty, except his death penalty was given not by keeping him in jail and giving him a needle or electric chair or gas like they inject people in Alabama this week. K. Ivy, you a murderer too. Oh yeah, I love murder. You love murder when you're doing the killing, not so much when you're the victim. But the other way you give people the death penalty is keep them in jail forever. There was an article in today's New York Times. This man is 88 years old, a Japanese prisoner who was exonerated 10 years ago. They let him out, give him a new trial. He finally now has been declared not guilty after 44 years. I mean, my God. So just to be clear, this ain't just white people. You understand? But in this country, it's white people. In this country, and a few errant Negroes like Clarence Thomas. But the other way you do it is give people life and then let them out 2 minutes before they take their last breath. Give yourself credit for exonerating them, and then they die. And well, today at 6:30, Paul Coates is going to be at Sankofa to discuss with the daughter of Russell Maroon Schultz, who is now an ancestor, the new memoir that's just come out called I Am Maroon. Russell Schultz with Kanya Dalmeida. This is the book that just came out, I Am Maroon, well, about a month ago. And Paul's going to be there today at Sankofa. But, as I was saying, this question then of violence that we're faced with, this question of violence, this question of what's going on in this country. 4 years ago, we had just come through an existential political crisis. And so we discussed the power to pause in that summer of reckoning. And as I say in the description for our conversation today, that's posted here, with the subject matter again being blood on the leaves, blood at the root. The summer of the reckoning was behind us 4 years ago, as was the 2020 election. The political culmination of a once-in-a-lifetime conversion of disease, state violence, and electoral politics. And we had been freed of other things enough to sit still for a moment. Hundreds of thousands of people tens upon tens upon tens of thousands. Every week we're in conversation. All these people here, all these people here. Now slowly the class that benefits less from that and more from keeping us moving, keep them Negroes moving, keep them people working, keeping that working class moving. They have been clawing it back, trying to get back to that pre-2020 rhythm. And we have been complicit. This morning, every Saturday, this morning, no different, except it is different in terms of subject matter and how we entered it from the beginning this morning to now is a moment to pause, is a moment to sit, is a moment to reflect. People say, well, what are we going to do? Well, the doing is in this work. Freedom is in the trying. Optimism is in the being. This is the issue. Now we're poised 4 short years later, which might as well be a million years ago in terms of the momentum of our memory. We are poised again on the brink of another match between the bloody politics of white nationalism and the pragmatic politics of blunting state violence. Voting in self-defense, participating in self-defense, except unlike 4 years ago, we got the response to Obama, even though we didn't get what we was promised for during Obama, but that's another thing. We got the bill for it, Donald Trump. And then 4 years later, we was all out in the street, and then we all rushed into the ballot box, boom, 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 got Biden in, and we got 4 years of blunting state violence. It's not perfect. Kamala Harris gave a speech this week in Pittsburgh. I'm a capitalist, but you know why she got to get that speech? You know why her brother-in-law probably was in her ear like, look, we got to get this speech. Because you got to convince people you're not a communist. Why? Because you got a wholly insane ass man at the top of that other ticket. And the real threat beyond him, which is the people who absolutely are the architects, the intellectual architects behind this document, Project 2025, that would be the vice president, who is wholly insane. I started saying incel, who is wholly insane. But the point is that this is the momentum. Trump's a signing pin, an errant one at that. JD Vance is clean up online MAGA. Clean up online MAGA. That's what we're going to have to do now. So in that process, we are now back, except we have 4 years of the white nationalism, 4 years of the try to claw some of that stuff back, have your best opponents in the White House, push them hard as hell, but take the victories you get incrementally. And now you got 2 sets to pick from and 3 people who like being on TV. I'm undecided. You ain't undecided. You like being on TV. Or you ain't undecided. You being paid by the Trump campaign. Or you ain't undecided. You probably need some counseling and maybe a nap or some warm cocoa or somewhere and get a good night's sleep. And in the morning you wake up, if you have a rational mind, it won't be difficult. But the question we have to raise in this context is, can we recapture our imaginations? Because see, what happens when you don't have memory, you also then have a failure of imagination. And a failure of imagination means that you can't tap into your memory and repurpose it for something creative and transformative, whether it be the musicians we saw, those cultural meaning makers at the beginning of our time together today, or politicians who can see beyond the limitations of what has happened before, if they can see beyond the last 4 years, the last 8 years, the last 20 years, and evoke, as Joe Biden evoked, Franklin Roosevelt, or evoke, as Kamala Harris evoked, the roots of her background, which came up in communities that understood that the local informs the national, informs the global, and ultimately we can do better because we have done better. That imagination is fueled by memory. So can we recapture our imaginations from the frenetic pace of distraction and consumption? Because what has happened is, once COVID lifted enough for people to move around, here comes the constant influx of stuff. Remember in the dead of COVID, when everybody was here every week, and then, no, what am I going to watch now? What am I going to think about now? I think I might read a book. I think I might watch this documentary. Now it's like, okay, when this is over, I'm going outside. What you going to do? I'm going to the mall. What you going to do? No, I'm just going outside. I'm going to eat and go to sleep, and then I'm going to watch something else. And I'm bored. I'm going to all of that stimulation, all of that frenetic pace of distraction and consumption feeds the idea that the spectacle has now overwhelmed us. And so it's autumn. Think about Billie Holiday, Autumn in New York. I couldn't stop playing it in the middle of the night last night. Autumn in New York. Sometimes it seems so inviting. Again, talking about strange fruit made me think about autumn in New York, and I realized it's fall now. And every fall, the United Nations meets. And New York City, it inspires I love the energy of New York. It has arresting vistas. Everything is there. All that energy. Some people hate New York, and I think because it can be overwhelming. But we live in a society. Everywhere is New York now. In fact, Prof, I don't know. Have you have any thoughts on? I didn't catch whether you talked about it yet or not. Scorsese's new film, Megalopolis. Have you heard about it?
I have not checked it out.
Yeah, I haven't checked it out yet. I might go see it in the middle of the, I like to wait either first movie or last movie. That way ain't nobody there. But
I thought you were going to ask me about Adams. Since you talked.
Oh no, the Clarence Thomas of Donald Trump's. No, I mean, and yeah, I will ask you about. I mean, yeah, I would definitely. But I was thinking Megalopolis in part because reading a few of the reviews and watching a couple of the trailers, the whole idea that the thesis in Megalopolis, and shout out to Giancarlo Esposito, who apparently is paying like the mayor of this futuristic city that's based on Rome, but it's based on now kind of thing. There's this debate between, I think, the Adam Driver character who wants to build a utopia, a place where everybody can fulfill their full human potential, and the pragmatist, the Giancarlo Esposito character. Perhaps, I don't know. I haven't seen the movie yet. Gonna go see it. Maybe he got some Eric Adams in him. He's a black mayor of this huge city. No, you got to address this thing with the world we live in, not the world you want to live in. But again, thinking about that in terms of the New York that exists, once a year, the whole world in terms of the leadership comes to the United Nations. And there's this arresting energy. There's this thing, but there's also an overwhelming sense of uncontrollability. Yesterday, the mass murderer Bibi Netanyahu came in to speak at the UN. Me and Lamont mentioned it in the morning, and we had the TV monitors on. And then we had a break, and Lamont was like, "Man, listen to all that cheering." I said, "That's not cheering, Lamont. I've been in that room. I'm gonna tell you what that is. They done packed the gallery with his people. True enough." Because they only show you the podium in the shot that'll be on CNN, or when you zoom out and when other people were showing other vantages in terms of where all the diplomats sat, virtually the entire diplomatic corps got up and walked out on this mass murderer. So the cheers you heard and hear, that's his people in the rafters. Yeah, and he's up there spewing straight up fascist murder. Total victory. Blah, blah, blah. They have torn up towns. In fact, today's New York Times, when they claim they killed the head of Hezbollah, and Ta-Nehisi writes in the excerpts that I've read of his book, he said, when Nat Turner did what he did, I'm not sure that I would have been one of those people calling for calm and saying, okay, slaves, no, y'all don't need to, perhaps we need to think about another moderate way. Who would I have been if they had killed my mother in slavery? Who would I have been? And he said, I'm comparing this to Hamas. He says no killing is justifiable. I'm not saying that, but when you as I read that Harper's index that said 2/3 of the people there, and the survey documentation is on another page. They just go through the flat line there in terms of the statistics, saying that it was justified. I'm saying, if you, and here we go. I'm gonna pause here just for 10 seconds and ask this question. Nat Turner, what side would you have been on? Now, fast forward to where we are today. What if that's not Bibi Netanyahu at the podium? What if it's John C. Calhoun talking about slavery and putting down slave rebellions? This is today's New York Times. In West Bank, Israel's bulldozers rip up miles and miles of roads. Friends, they are preparing the way for Jared Kushner's condos. They are literally digging up the remainders of the towns they've been bombing for a year. First paragraph, over 2 weeks, Palestinians watched as Israeli military bulldozers tore up mile after mile of their streets and alleys, sewage seeping into the dusty ruts left behind. The people of Tulkarm and Jenin, the two West Bank towns that were the focus of Israel's latest military raids, said they had never before experienced such a scale of destruction. Residents pointed to one video that shows an Israeli armored bulldozer flattening a decorative roundabout and nearby vegetation. Visual evidence analyzed by the New York Times supports accounts from residents about the damage from Israelis' latest raids. Damage? Videos filmed in Tulkarm and Jenin show bulldozers destroying infrastructure and businesses, and soldiers impeding local emergency responders. So you flatten it, you catch somebody in the rubble and they die, you stop the ambulance from coming. You mass murdering. Mass murder. And their excuse, we saw a Hamas person over there, or we think they're hiding over there. That ain't why. You're murderers, damn it. And if this was slavery and you were the Confederacy, which side are you on? It's very simple. And Ta-Nehisi writes that. He says, it's very simple. Everybody in the American media, which is why they may come for him, because he's saying in this article that the problem I'm going to have is probably going to be with the media because it's narrated as it's a complicated situation. He says some things complicated, some very simple. My mom could tell you, or a child, killing is wrong. So this is the challenge that we have in this moment. Can we pull back from the distractions? Now, in terms of, and then we'll come now to a close, because 4 years ago, the lines were moral lines. They're very clear, and Donald Trump was playing into it. 4 years from the summer of 2020 and the early fall of 2020, the lines are no less clear, except now it's not upside down Bibles and smoke. Now it's Haitians need to be deported. Now it's people need to be killed. Understand that there is no real labor party in the United States in major electoral politics. Democrats, Republicans are not, both of them are not parties of labor, but the Democrats absorb much of the labor energy. The Teamsters riff is about race, not class. The head of the Teamsters and the Teamsters, we're not endorsing anybody, but the black Teamsters endorsed Kamala Harris in August. The regional Teamster formations, including the West Coast, California, Nevada, including the Midwest, Wisconsin, Michigan, have endorsed Kamala Harris, but the press keeps acting like the Teamsters didn't take a stand. That's because for the press, I'm talking about the white commercial news media, mass media press. Whiteness is race, not class. It's very important. You know, Frederick Jameson passed away this week. Frederick Jameson, the great scholar, intellectual, long of Duke University, wrote a very important book years ago called Postmodernism, the Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism. He says if modernism, which is like the 19-teens, 20s, you know, the factories, the moving forward, so everybody had to read The Great Gatsby and about the angst between the rich and the poor. And he said if modernism, Wallace Thurman, the Black of the Berry, the New Negro movement, Elaine Locke, and if you want to go to the black side, if modernism, Louis Armstrong on that trumpet and the birth of jazz, if modernism is a result of the kind of industrial revolution and its aftermath, postmodernism is the cultural logic of late capitalism. The idea that there are no overarching narratives, that everything is relational, that everything can be defined out of or in context. That's very important. Frederick Jameson, you say, you know, what that creates is a society we live in that has a perpetual present, a perpetual feeling of change or angst that obliterates any notion of tradition. So meaning what? This is my version of this music. This is my version of this art. Well, how does it connect to what happened before? It doesn't have to connect. I'm doing it today. Okay, that's your cultural meaning making. But then how does it connect over time? Because it is through movement and memory that you have the momentum of memory, and that feeds into your state formation. Ask the people who still go to see Mozart at a concert hall or listen to that CD or listen to it on your digital platform. Why they listen to Mozart? You should have new stuff. No, you Negroes need to just keep creating new stuff. And if it's old, let's just play a little bit of jazz or some blues or salvage it from R&B for new hip hop. But don't go back to them drums, although the drums never left. You don't need to go all the way back. Only we go all the way back. But in postmodernism, which is the cultural logic of late capitalism, it's always the new. It's always the perpetually present. It's always the commodification of what is produced, because the culture is a product of the capitalist structure. In other words, the key isn't just to make something new. The key is to sell it to you. It's for you to buy it. So the political campaign of 4 years ago, which is fueled literally blood on the leaves, Breonna Taylor, blood on the leaves, George Floyd, blood on the leaves, Ahmaud Arbery, blood on the leaves is transmitted 4 years later to the t-shirts. I got a cool t-shirt. Are you voting for Harris? I mean, who are you voting for? I see you with the t-shirt. Oh, I don't know. I'm gonna try to vote, but I'll see if I get there. You know, I got some things I got to do. The perpetually present is calling me. The cultural logic of late capitalism is calling me. I bought a t-shirt. Ain't that enough? No, you got to go pull the lever. Early voting. November the 5th is not election day. Today is election day in states with early voting. I read an article. Oh, I hope I could find. I can't find it quickly. I know I can't because I read it online. There's a lady in Mississippi, white woman. She has a very rare form of cancer. She's been had it for 12 years. This is a cancer that is just a horrible cancer. It invaded her mouth. So it took most of her lower jaw, some of her upper jaw, the roof of her mouth. They gave her I forget, like 6 months to live. 12 years later, she was still alive, but it came back violently. And they told her, you don't have long to live. So you know what this lady did? She and her husband, they found out when is early voting. When is early voting? And she cast her vote this week. And she said, she in Mississippi. Talk about hope. It's going to go red. This lady right here said, I may not, probably won't be here November the 5th. This will be the last vote I cast for president in my life. But damn it, I want a better world. Boy, I wish I could find the quote, because what she said at the end of this article, this white woman in Mississippi, she and her husband, the polling place right down the street from their house, they walked to it. She said she wears a mask now, not for protection, but because if she took the mask off, people, she says, I don't want people looking at me, because they can't not stare. She said, I walked to the booth. I signed my ballot. I gave it to them. She said, because this is the last election I'm going to have a vote in my lifetime. And I want my vote to count because I want to live in a better society. That is a hell of a testament, isn't it? That's a hell of a testament. So, I should mention the transition of Bill Lucey. William Bill Lucey, the great labor leader for many years, Secretary Treasurer of AFSCME, good friends of Martin Luther King. Oh, you found it? Oh, thank you, Prof. She found. Yes, Professor Hunter, you posted it in Narrative and in Nubia and on YouTube. Thank you. Such a moving thing. Bill Lucey made transition this week here in DC, of 90 years old. He's been 91 in November. Friend and comrade of Martin Luther King. A lot of people don't know Bill Lucey was the co-creator with a local minister in Memphis of the phrase, I am a man. That's those posters that they wore at the sanitation strike that now we see. And it's interesting, the provenance of it, which changed my attitude toward the phrase, because my thing is, you ain't got to tell white people you're a man. Let them come find out if you're not. You don't have to tell white people you're not a woman. But what he said was, we needed something that would galvanize us, because this was a long struggle. It was a long arc struggle, and people began to lose hope. But he said, I heard Jim Lawson, of course, another recent ancestor. He said, I heard James Lawson talking. We were at a mass meeting. He was like, they won't even negotiate with these brothers when they come in to talk about wages, when they talk about living, working conditions. He said, they won't even sit and give them the dignity of treating them like men. And he said, a couple of days later, we were getting ready for the next march. We have nightly planning meetings on what the next day would look like. And we sitting there talking like, we need something that would send a message that would also lift spirits, that would also. And so they played around with language, and that Lawson moment came back to him. And he said, what if we say I'm a man? Not as a thing to prove to white people, but to declare what we already know to be true. In other words, you're not going to push us around. You're not going to ignore us. It ain't even about you. It's about us. I'm a man. Think about James Brown. I'm a man. I'm the son of a man. I often said that when Negroes get crazy in chairs meetings and administrative meetings at Howard, and then they be like, I can't believe you said that to him. Say, I'm a man. I'm the son of a man. In other words, so that gave me a different attitude toward but Bill Lucey was the co-creator with another brother of the I Am a Man speech. He was there, after Dr. King was killed. He helped lead the U.S. dimension of the anti-apartheid Free South Africa movement. He was a founder of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, which of course you had the Coalition of South African Trade Unionists, COSATU, that he was linked with. A very important figure who made transition this week. There was a report out of Georgia. I want to mention this in case folks have their network, and hopefully she will have been, as of yesterday, Nicole Evers-Everett, who is Sister Rena Rhetoric's daughter. Rena Evers, of course, is the daughter of Merle Evers and her husband, Medgar Evers. She hasn't been seen for the last couple of days. And so they're looking for Rena Evers' daughter. And so, any information, I think it's been posted and circulated on social media, Nicole Evers-Everett. My students got a chance to sit with this sister. I told you this week that they were going, so I saw them in class on Thursday. I said, how was it? And they couldn't stop talking about Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson, Igbo speakers, I hope Ms. Zanelli is in here. If I is in here, she will know the translation, because in part 1 of her memoir, Lovely One, chapter 2, as I told y'all last week, it's called Black Studies. She's talking. Chapter 1 is about her mama's family. Chapter 2 is about her daddy's family. What an amazing story. Her mother and father school teachers. Those of you from DC, I know Dr. Wilkerson, Courtney. I know Courtney's in here. Sister Courtney. Her daddy was taught at Ballou. He taught at Ballou High School. Her mother was at Thomas Jefferson Middle School. And it's very interesting because her father designed the first Black Studies course at Ballou, and then worked with people from across the school district and scholars in DC to develop a citywide Black Studies course. This was in the 1960s, 1968. And she writes here at the end, I want to talk some more about this. This is a great memoir, y'all. Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Jackson says, I've always felt touched by grace that it was Aunt Carolyn who gave me my name. Her Aunt Carolyn, her auntie, worked in West Africa with Peace Corps. She said, my mother reached out to her with a request, that's her sister, that she send a list of meaningful African names. She says, I've always felt a special closeness to my aunt. And so she traveled the world. She did all this stuff. And so she says, I try to draw on my aunt's example of fearlessness. Very interesting figure, Ketanji Brown Jackson, her family. She says, from the list she provided, my parents chose Ketanji Onyeka, which she said meant lovely one in an African dialect. Language, sis. Again, just like she didn't know who Prince Hall was. We all learn from each other. Again, we gotta, I mean, Ketanji Brown Jackson, flat-foot brilliant. And you can't know everything. The editor should never have allowed dialect to make it into a book in my hand right now. Because if that's a dialect, French is a funky-ass dialect. Let's be clear. We have no way of knowing which of the thousands of dialects spoken on the mother continent is the source of my name. Of course you do. Ms. Zanelli corrected me on Monday night because I was talking to Joseph Asike, my colleague, in the philosophy department at Howard. CK is Igbo, and I know you speak Igbo. There's some Igbo speakers in here. He said that Onyeka, except I said she spells it with an I. He said I would say with an E. Onyeka has a like great of God, I think was the translation he gave. You can absolutely, if these are words out of African languages, you can absolutely do it. I think now somebody send that to Justice Brown Jackson, Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson. She says, even so, she says, we have never managed to trace its linguistic origins. I think she could do it. We could help her. Anyway, even so, as I grew older, she writes, the sound of my name would often remind me of my aunt. Genealogy. And when people would tell me that my name was unique, creative, and beautiful, many probably in the social structure, you want to try something, here's an African name that does not have a prominence in the African language directly, just got all the vowels and consonants. That would be my dear friend, Valethia Watkins. I would think of it as a tribute to the woman who had gifted it to me. Aunt Carolyn was unique, creative, and beautiful too, an extraordinary soul who lived in her Christian faith, all while expressing her love for her family and pride in our culture. My parents very intentionally installed pride in our African heritage and faith in the future, in me as well. When I was a toddler, they would sometimes dress me in mini dashikis and kente fabrics and style my hair in afro puffs. And from the time I had language enough to understand, they explained to me that despite the many legal and societal barriers they had faced growing up in the South, my path was clear. And if I worked hard enough, I could do anything, be anything I wanted. As my parents saw it, by law, Black people could now become full sharers in the promises of America, and they made sure that from birth, I embraced this idea with everything that I was, even when, especially when, life flashed up evidence to the contrary. As much as I would disagree with Justice Jackson with the idea that you could drive all that momentum into the ditch called the United States of America, I would agree with her that it's never been about the social structure we live in. It's always about creating this type of society and world that we want to live in. And if that tree is nourished by blood, then that tree must be pulled up root and branch. But if that blood is not at the root of that tree, but rather just on the leaves because of the violence outside of the tree, then we must stop the violence everywhere, in order for that tree to restore itself to its full function in the world. So I'll stop.
Ashe. And they found Medgar Evers and Miley Evers'
Oh, she's okay?
yeah, she's
Thank you. That's good. I didn't realize. Thank you. Because somebody sent me that, and I wanted to make sure that okay. Oh my goodness. So it's good. I didn't do the. Oh, good. You found it. Oh, the Jackson Clarion Ledger. Very good.
yeah.
That was yesterday's paper, huh?
Yeah.
The Clarion Ledger. Good. That's good. Thank you. Yeah, because my goodness, people, man. Well, that's good. Community at work. Hey, is anybody? I saw this. I saw this in the news. You don't go anywhere. I'm just gonna mention it. Adrian Edwards did this companion volume. I want to see this. It's in New York at the Whitney. It's called Edges of Ailey. This is Alvin Ailey, of course. It's a new exhibit. This is the, I get the exhibition catalogs when I can't make it. There's Alvin Ailey, Edges of Ailey. It's a big old book. This book is like almost 400 pages. It's like stuff from, of course, there's the Ailey Company. I mean, but it seems like it just opened or it's just getting ready to open. So it's documents, of course, there's Revelations. Everybody knows Revelations. But it's not just that. It's like notebooks of his, drawings, companion pieces from other pieces in the museum. Hey, so maybe somebody will come in on office hours on Monday night. Anybody who's gone, let me know, because I'm going up there to see it at some point, but I won't be able to see it no time soon. So anyway.
How many times have you seen Ailey?
I have never seen Ailey.
Me either.
No, really? We gotta see Ailey Prop. What we gonna do? You gonna get some?
You gotta get tickets.
Yeah, because Reba Kelsey, she takes her daughter, Shari. They go every time they're in Atlanta. They love Revelations. They say you never see it the same time twice. They always do something. We gotta go see Ailey. How you gonna be up there?
I'm trying to get. There's one poster of one of the dancers in a full split, and it's so beautiful. And I was like, I want to get that blown up and put on my wall. So.
Oh no! Yes.
Okay. All right. No.
Okay.
All right.
Hey y'all. Oh, that's beautiful. Monday night we'll be in office hours again. Thanks, Jelani. We'll be still in frame of question 1. How do we undertake Africana study or studies? And we'll continue. And and I guess next week we'll have to talk about the Walls Vance. What do you think's going to happen? Oh wait, no, we didn't talk. See, okay, it's not a distraction, Prof. Eric Adams. I know y'all talked about Eric Adams.
Yeah, I got a whole video on it.
Did you drop it? It was dropped.
Chapter and verse. Yeah, it's up there. I'll drop it in the chat.
Drop the chat. Yeah.
So we ain't gonna repeat that because it's really irrelevant, but it's also it speaks to the apathy that many of us have because you think, oh, everything's rigged and it doesn't matter. It does matter who you elect. It matters, and it matters more that the person has character.
Absolutely.
It matters more, and people have receipts and they have a history, and that should matter too. And I know we can get muddy talking about this election cycle, but it's our responsibility to elect the people that truly represent us, or who could be not in the pockets of other people, but
right.
in our not in our pockets, but who can be pushed to greatness. It's our responsibility to push these people to greatness.
Absolutely. Shout out to Jermaine Williams. I'm watching him on some interviews. They trying to get him. Jamani, not Jamani. Jermaine, you talk to him, huh?
I haven't actually. Lareed speaks to him a lot.
Oh yeah, Lareed. Yeah, of course.
Players had him on. I don't think I've had Jamani on my show.
Okay.
He seems like a very impassioned person.
Yeah,
I hear that Cuomo's probably gonna run.
You saw in the New York Times, that was the front page yesterday. They already positioning Cuomo. What the hell? Boy, you're a white man, boy. It's good to be a white man in America, but I mean,
but it's also we follow. Look, Al Green got elected because people thought he was Al Green. A lot of
how about that?
In many ways, that Cuomo name. His daddy left an indelible mark.
Some
people still love his brother. From CNN.
That's
and
crazy.
Some people miss him as governor with all of the things that got him hemmed up because Kathy Hochul is a whole whatever she is, she's person.
Like Kamala Harris said, this. Yes, she's a person. The music of Black people. Oh, I saw also this is the final. I had to mention it because it happened this week. I saw Alabama A&M bid on Birmingham Southern's whole campus. They were going to buy it, but they rejected the offer. Miles College is going to buy Birmingham Southern. There's optimism in the world. I mean, I'm like, what?
You talked about this yesterday on the radio with Lamont. Urban View Morning, 7 a.m. to 10 Eastern, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Dr. Carr is on with Lamont. Is great radio, by the way. And we all were talking about. Listen, I'm just I'm a subscriber. So
no, don't even do that. Y'all know when y'all get in a Karen. Look, now that's become my thing. Now I'll be like, I need to be getting ready. No, I gotta listen to. We'll go.
There was a point when you were talking about what's going on with Netanyahu, and I'm driving, and the radio went out for like a minute and change, and I was like,
"Oh,
yeah." No, I had to look around, like, what's happening? I'm turning my radio up. I was like, is it? No, it's the satellite. It just happened to go out because you were going in, and I said, huh.
I'm gonna balance it, but I mean,
I said, huh, because we supposed y'all got Megyn Kelly on these airwaves, so like. There should be no problem with
Megyn Kelly's on the right side.
All right, well, I'm gonna say less. Well, listen,
me too.
I love you.
I love you too.
I love you in this space, and I love everybody who is supporting us. So
thanks, y'all. Thank you all.
And thank you for this. We're gonna end with this.
Oh, what? Oh, come on now. Let me pause. Let me mute myself. Come on, finish.
I tell you, I don't know much about the dice. I want you to listen to me. Oh, I don't claim to be no gambler. I tell you, I don't know much about the dice. But I want you to hear this, Mr. Brown. Yeah. But I'll wage, and my baby knows. Bobby, she knows she ain't the kind that's gonna crap out twice. It's my own fault, darling. Treat me the way you wanna do. I said it's my own fault, darling. Treat me the way you wanna do. Oh, and when I was loving you, girl, I hit that time, girl, I didn't love you.